I used to think memory was something you kept in your head, locked away like photographs in a drawer. But now, sitting here in this house that echoes with 73 years of living, I understand that memory lives in your bones, in the worn grooves of the kitchen floor where I've walked 10,000 times, in the weight of a wedding ring that's grown lighter as my finger has grown thinner. They thought I was losing my mind. My son David, my daughter-in-law Margaret, they spoke about me like I was already gone, like I was a piece of furniture they were deciding whether to keep or donate. But I wasn't gone. Not even close. I was just quiet, watching, listening, remembering everything. It started about 2 years ago, or maybe it was 3. Time moves differently when you're old. The days are long but the years are short, someone once told me, and they were right about that. I'd been forgetting little things, where I put my reading glasses, whether I'd taken my morning pills, the name of the mailman who'd been delivering to this house for a decade. Normal things, I thought. The kind of things that happen when you've lived long enough to accumulate more memories than your mind has room for. But David noticed. Of course he noticed. He's always been the observant one, my David, ever since he was a boy watching his father and me with those serious brown eyes, taking everything in. He started visiting more often, which should have made me happy. After his father died 6 years ago, David had pulled away, buried himself in his work, in his marriage, in a life that seemed to have less and less room for his aging mother. So when he started coming by every week, sometimes twice a week, I was grateful at first. I made his favorite cookies, the oatmeal raisin ones I'd been making since he was 7 years old. I put on a fresh pot of coffee. I pretended not to notice the way he watched me, the way he tested me with little questions. Mom, did you remember to pay the electric bill? Mom, did you eat lunch today? Mom, do you remember what day it is? I played along because I loved him. Because he was my son, my only child, the baby I'd held against my chest 52 years ago and promised to protect forever. I didn't realize then that he'd stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as a problem to be solved. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October when I heard them talking. I'd been in my bedroom, lying down because my hip had been aching, and I'd left my door slightly open the way I always do. I don't like feeling closed off from my own home. David and Margaret were in the living room, and their voices carried down the hallway, not quite whispers but not quite normal speaking volume either. The kind of voices people use when they think they're being discreet. "She's getting worse," Margaret said, and I could hear the impatience in her voice like bitter coffee. "She asked me 3 times yesterday what time we were coming over." 3 times, David. "I know," my son replied, and oh, the weariness in those 2 words cut me deeper than any knife. Dr. Patterson said it's probably early-stage dementia. It's only going to get worse from here. I stopped breathing. Dementia. I'd been to Dr. Patterson just once, 3 months earlier, for a routine checkup. He'd asked me some questions, silly things like what year it was and who the president was, and I'd answered them all correctly. At least, I thought I had. Had I? Suddenly I wasn't sure. The doubt crept in like cold water. "What are we going to do?" Margaret asked. "We can't keep driving over here every other day to check on her. You have work, we have our own lives. And this house, David, this house is worth at least $800,000 in this market. That's our retirement. That's our future." The silence that followed felt like falling. I waited for David to defend me, to tell his wife that I was his mother, that I was still here, still alive, still deserving of respect and love. Instead, he said, "She'll forget everything soon. We just need to be patient. Once the dementia progresses enough, we can get power of attorney, sell the house, move her into a facility. She won't even remember this place after a while. She'll forget everything soon." Those 4 words echoed in my head like a death sentence. My own son, the boy I'd rocked to sleep through countless nights, the teenager I'd stayed up waiting for when he missed curfew, the man I'd helped through his divorce from his first wife, through the loss of his father, my David was waiting for me to disappear so he could cash in on my existence. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I heard them leave 20 minutes later, heard Margaret's cheerful bye, Mom, as if she hadn't just been planning my erasure, heard David's love you that suddenly sounded hollow as a drum. When the door closed, I lay there in the afternoon light filtering through my lace curtains, the same curtains I'd hung when David was in kindergarten, and I cried. Not the gentle tears of sadness but the harsh, choking sobs of betrayal. But then, as the sun began to set and the room filled with golden autumn light, something shifted inside me. I wiped my eyes. I sat up. I looked around at this room, at this house that my husband Thomas and I had bought in 1972, that we'd painted and repaired and loved, where we'd raised our son and buried our dog and celebrated 47 anniversaries. This house that held every important moment of my life in its walls. And I thought, I will not forget. I will not disappear. I will not make this easy for them. The next morning, I called my old friend Patricia, who'd been my neighbor for 30 years before she moved to Florida. Patricia had always been sharper than a tack, and she listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, then she said, "Evelyn, how's your memory really? Tell me the truth." I told her the truth. Yes, I forgot small things sometimes. Yes, I got confused occasionally. But I could tell her what I'd eaten for breakfast, what we'd talked about the last time we spoke 3 weeks ago, the names of all my doctors, my social security number, the day Thomas died, March 17, 2019, a Sunday, at 6:42 in the morning with his hand in mine. "You're forgetful," Patricia said firmly. "You're not demented. There's a difference. And you need to protect yourself." She gave me the name of a lawyer, a woman named Sarah Chen who specialized in elder law. I called that afternoon and made an appointment. When I walked into Sarah's office the following week, I felt more clear-headed than I had in months. I told her everything about David, about Margaret, about what I'd overheard, about my fears. Sarah was younger than David, probably in her early 40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner that reminded me of my own mother. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, "I'm going to be very direct with you. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer them honestly. Can you do that?" For the next hour, she questioned me thoroughly, testing my memory, my comprehension, my ability to make decisions. She asked about my finances, my health, my relationships. She asked me to explain why I was there, to repeat information she'd told me earlier, to solve simple problems. When we finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. "Mrs. Morrison, you are absolutely capable of managing your own affairs. You have some age-related memory issues, which is completely normal for someone in their 70s. But you are not incompetent, and you are not demented. What you are is being manipulated." Those words, being manipulated, hit me like a physical blow because they made it real. My son was trying to manipulate me. My son was waiting for me to lose myself so he could take everything. Sarah helped me draft a new will. In the old one, David inherited everything, the house, my savings, Thomas's life insurance, my jewelry, everything we'd built over a lifetime. The new will was different. I left David a token amount, $25,000, enough that he couldn't claim I'd forgotten him, but nothing like what he'd been expecting. The house I left to the Alzheimer's Foundation, with the stipulation that it be sold and the proceeds used for patient care and research. My savings, about $200,000, I divided between 3 charities, one for hospice care, one for senior services, and one for abandoned animals, because Thomas and I had always loved dogs. My jewelry, the pieces that mattered, I left to Patricia's granddaughter, a sweet girl who'd always visited me when she was in town. But the most important change was the letter. Sarah suggested I write a letter to be read after my death, explaining my decision. I spent 3 days on that letter, writing and rewriting until every word felt true. I told David that I'd heard him that October afternoon. I told him how much it had broken my heart. I told him that I understood he'd been thinking of his future, but that he'd forgotten I was still living my present. I told him that I'd hoped to leave him everything, not because of the money, but because it would have meant he valued the life his father and I had built, the love we'd given him. I told him I was disappointed, a word I'd never wanted to use with my son, but there it was. And I told him I forgave him, because despite everything, he was still my child, and love doesn't stop just because it's been betrayed. It just changes shape, becomes something sadder and wiser. I kept living my life, but differently now. I stopped pretending not to notice when David tested me. When he asked me if I'd remembered to do something, I'd look him straight in the eye and say, "Yes, David, I remembered." I started keeping a journal, writing down everything I did each day, every conversation, every thought. I wanted proof, for myself more than anyone, that I was still here, still present. I was more forgetful than I used to be, that was true. But I was also more alive, more awake, more aware of each moment because I knew how precious they were. David and Margaret kept visiting, kept making their plans in lowered voices they thought I couldn't hear. Sometimes I wanted to confront them, to tell them I knew everything. But I didn't. I let them think they were being clever. I let them believe I was fading away. There was a strange power in it, in knowing more than they thought I knew, in being underestimated. It reminded me of a poem Thomas used to quote, something about rage and dying light, and I thought yes, I will rage, but quietly, privately, in ways they'll never see coming. 6 months ago, David brought me papers to sign. Power of attorney, he said. Just a precaution, he said, in case anything happened to me. His eyes didn't quite meet mine. I held those papers in my hands, papers that would have given him control of everything, and I smiled. Let me have my lawyer look at these first, I said sweetly. Just to make sure I understand everything. The flash of frustration in his face was almost worth the heartbreak. He tried to argue, said it was simple, said I should trust him. I just kept smiling and said, I do trust you, sweetheart. I just want to be careful. He left the papers with me, and I gave them to Sarah the next day. We laughed about it, though the laughter had tears in it. Last month, I was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It came fast, the way these things sometimes do. 1 month I was feeling tired, the next month I was in the hospital being told I had maybe 6 months, probably less. David cried when I told him. Real tears, I think, though I've learned not to trust my interpretation of his emotions anymore. He said all the right things about treatments and second opinions and fighting this. Margaret held my hand and looked appropriately sad. And I thought about telling them then, about the new will, about everything. But I didn't. Some gifts are better left wrapped until the right moment. I'm writing this now from my bedroom, the same room where I heard their voices 2 years ago. I've been home from the hospital for 3 weeks, and hospice comes every day now. The pain is manageable with medication, and my mind is still clear, clearer maybe than it's been in years, the way things sometimes sharpen when you know they're ending. David visits daily now, sometimes twice a day. He holds my hand and tells me stories about when he was young, and I want so badly to just let it all go, to forgive everything and pretend it never happened. But I can't. Not because I don't love him, but because some betrayals can't be undone, only acknowledged. Yesterday, he brought me soup and sat by my bed while I ate it, and he said, Mom, I'm sorry if I haven't been the son you deserved. It was the closest he'd come to an admission, and for a moment, I almost broke. Almost told him everything, almost changed the will back. But then Margaret appeared in the doorway and said, David, did you call the real estate agent back? And the moment shattered like glass. He looked embarrassed, caught, and I just smiled and said, It's all right, dear. I understand. I probably have a few weeks left, maybe a month if I'm unlucky. The cancer is spreading fast, and the pain is getting harder to manage. But I'm not afraid. I've lived a full life, loved deeply, lost greatly, learned hard lessons. I've held my husband's hand as he died, and soon someone I've made my peace with myself, with the fact that my son valued money more than memory. I've written letters to the few people who matter, to Patricia, to Sarah, to David himself. In his letter, the one he'll read after I'm gone, I've tried to explain not just what he did wrong, but why it mattered. I've tried to help him understand that in trying to claim my future, he lost something more valuable, the chance to truly be present in my present, these last years, these last months. The new will is locked in Sarah's safe. David will find out about it when I'm gone, when he can't argue or manipulate or plead his case. He'll know that I knew, that I was never as far gone as he hoped, that I chose to give away everything he'd been waiting for. Maybe he'll understand then that some things can't be inherited, only earned. Maybe he'll realize that the real inheritance I wanted to give him, love, integrity, compassion, was something he chose not to accept. Or maybe he'll just be angry and feel cheated, and he'll tell people his mother went senile after all, that she didn't know what she was doing. I can't control that part. What I can control is this, I didn't forget. When my son said I would forget everything, he was wrong. I remembered it all, every slight, every dismissive word, every conversation held in hushed tones about my decline. But I also remembered everything that came before. I remembered the good parts too, because that's what makes this so painful. If I hadn't loved him so much, the betrayal wouldn't have cut so deep. I'm not writing this for revenge. I'm writing it because the truth matters, because bearing witness to your own life matters, because even at the end, especially at the end, you have the right to say, I was here, I mattered, I chose how my story ended. The afternoon light is fading now, stretching long shadows across my bedroom floor. In a few minutes, the hospice nurse will arrive for my evening care. David will probably visit after dinner, will sit beside my bed and hold my hand and maybe even mean it when he says he loves me. And I'll hold his hand back, because he's still my son, because love is more complicated than we pretend it is, because you can be heartbroken and forgiving at the same time. I didn't change everything out of hatred. I changed it because I needed him to know that I saw him, really saw him, and that actions have consequences, and that even old women with fading memories have the right to their own dignity, their own choices, their own last words. This is mine.